Picture this. You've just been handed absolute power over a territory stretching from the sandy banks of the Nile River in Egypt all the way to the Indus River in India. It is literally the largest empire the world has ever seen up to this point. But there's a massive catch.
How do you actually govern all of that? I mean, there's no internet, there are no phones, there are no cars. If a rebellion breaks out 3,000 miles away, it might take months just for a messenger to reach you. And by the time you actually send an army, your empire is already fractured. This right here was the ultimate logistical nightmare of the ancient world. But the Persians figured it out. By the end of this explainer, you are going to understand the exact administrative formula they invented to solve this massive problem. Here's our agenda for today. 1. Rise of the kings. 2. The Persian control system. 3. Daily life in society. And 4. The Zoroastrian legacy. All right, let's jump right into section 1. Rise of the kings.
Everything starts with incredibly rapid, aggressive expansion. In 550 BCE, a leader named Cyrus II, better known as Cyrus the Great, takes control of the Median Empire, which basically launches the Persian Empire. His armies just sweep east and west, eventually taking over Babylon. After Cyrus dies in battle, his son Cambyses II takes the reins and launches a massive invasion of Egypt in 525 BCE. But Cambyses dies shortly after that. And following a really messy period of rebellions and disputed successions, an army officer named Darius I seizes the throne in 522 BCE.
Now, you might be asking, how did Cyrus the Great conquer so much territory without the whole thing immediately falling apart? Well, it wasn't just brute force. When Cyrus conquered a region, he didn't just burn the local government to the ground. Instead, he integrated the conquered elites into his own administration. It's kind of like a corporate merger where you keep the local branch managers in place because, hey, they know the market. He also showed strict respect for local traditions and religions. By just letting people keep their way of life, Cyrus drastically reduced their motivation to rebel. Pretty smart, right?
Which brings us to section 2, the Persian control system.
So Darius realized pretty quickly that you cannot micromanage an empire of this size. It's impossible. So he instituted this brilliant formula. He carved the empire into 20 distinct governing districts called satrapies. Each one was managed by a royal governor, known as a satrap. To make this super easy to grasp, just think of a satrapy exactly like a modern state or a province, and the satrap is your state governor. They collected taxes, maintained local order, and answered directly to the king.
But hold on, there is a massive, glaring problem with that system. If you give a local governor total control, an army, and tax revenue, what stops them from just declaring independence? Well, Darius solved this by creating a special class of royal officials known as the eyes and ears of the great king. These guys were essentially the ancient equivalent of federal auditors or secret shoppers. They'd show up completely unannounced at a satrapy, do a massive audit of the governor's books, and send a report straight back to the king. If a satrap was skimming taxes or plotting a revolt, the region's military garrison, which answered to the king, not the satrap, would promptly remove or execute them. Problem solved.
But how did those audit reports actually reach the king before the information was totally outdated? The Royal Road Relay System made it possible. Here's the breakdown. Step 1. A mounted courier rides at top speed for about 20 miles to a heavily guarded way station. Step 2. That courier immediately swaps his exhausted horse for a fresh one or just hands the message off to the next rider in line. Step 3. The process just repeats continuously. Using this system, a single message could travel an astonishing 200 miles in one day.
Now, I want to connect this directly to real life today. The ancient Greek historian Herodotus was utterly blown away by this Persian communication network. He actually wrote, "Neither snow, nor rain, nor heat, nor dark of night keeps them from completing their appointed course as swiftly as possible." If those words sound incredibly familiar to you, it's because the chief architect of the 8th Avenue Post Office in New York City read that exact description and had a variation of it carved right into the building. It is now widely known as the unofficial motto of the United States Postal Service. The literal blueprint for modern logistics was drawn in ancient Persia. And logistics wasn't just about moving mail. It was about moving life-sustaining resources. Under Persian rule, we see a massive expansion of qanats. These were long, underground tunnels that moved fresh water safely over many kilometers without it evaporating in the harsh, baking sun. This technological leap allowed agriculture and whole cities to thrive in environments that were otherwise completely arid. Let's shift gears to section 3, daily life and society.
Persian society was rigidly hierarchical, and the contrast between the top and the bottom was just staggering. On one hand, you have the royal court.
The king was seen as the earthly representative of the gods. Anyone in his presence had to bow completely to the ground, and servants literally covered their mouths so they wouldn't accidentally breathe on him. The court was famous for elaborate public ceremonies and receiving crazy exotic animal gifts. But then, on the other hand, you have the common free peasant. They lived in small villages, worked the land all day, and survived mostly on a basic diet of barley mash, figs, dates, and nuts. They rarely ever ate meat. But wait, here is a fascinating detail about that royal court. The king didn't just sit in one shiny capital city. He moved periodically. He migrated across the empire with thousands of officials, soldiers, wives, and servants. Now you might be thinking, wait a minute, why on earth would you undertake the absolute logistical nightmare of moving tens of thousands of people every single season? Well, part of it was simply to avoid extreme weather, just chasing the comfortable seasons. But more importantly, it was for political visibility. By physically moving the state across the countryside, the king made himself visible. It was a massive flex that cemented his absolute authority in every corner of the empire.
A massive part of that migrating state was, of course, the military. The army was incredibly diverse, pulling subject peoples from all over the empire, each showing up in their own distinct, colorful uniforms. They fought in massive corps of 10,000 men, blending deadly archery with heavy horseback combat. But the absolute pinnacle of Persian martial power was a unit known as the Immortals. This was an elite heavy infantry combat force. They served as the shock troops in war and as the king's personal, highly intimidating bodyguard during peacetime. Moving on to our final chapter, Section 4, the Zoroastrian Legacy.
The primary religion of the Persian heartland was Zoroastrianism, named after its founder, Zarathustra. This represented a profound shift in religious thinking for the ancient world. At its very core, it emphasized a universe locked in a perpetual, cosmic conflict between the ultimate forces of justice and the forces of wickedness.
Let's break down this dualistic theology because it's super interesting. On one side, you have Ahura Mazda, the Lord of Wisdom, the absolute force of good, who created the world as an entirely perfect place. Opposing him is Angra Mainyu, a destructive spirit, the absolute force of evil, whose sole dedication is to destroy that perfection. Zoroastrians believe that the world we live in is literally the battlefield for these two supreme forces, and every single human being has to make a free choice about which side they're going to support with their everyday actions. Now pay close attention here, because this is why this is so absolutely critical to world history. Consider these shared theological concepts: a single powerful God as the source of all good, an evil force plaguing the world, a final cosmic battle and judgment day, and a paradise afterlife for the righteous. When Cyrus the Great conquered Babylon, he actually freed the exiled Judeans living there and allowed them to return home. During their time in the Persian Empire, these Judeans were heavily exposed to these Zoroastrian ideas. Historians note that these exact concepts deeply influenced the development of later Judaism, which in turn provided the foundational tenets for Christianity and Islam.
Finally, let's wrap things up with our conclusion: the blueprint of empires.
The Persian Empire didn't just conquer, it innovated. Let's quickly summarize our key takeaways. They achieved rapid expansion not just with an elite military, but through the highly practical strategy of religious and cultural tolerance. They solved the ancient world's greatest logistical puzzle with absolute genius administration, inventing satrapies for local control and the royal road for lightning-fast communication. And finally, through Zoroastrian theology, they left a cultural and religious imprint that has outlasted their empire by millennia. Which leaves us with this final thought. When you drop a letter in the mail, or when you encounter the concepts of an ultimate good fighting an ultimate evil in modern theology, or honestly, even in superhero blockbuster movies, you are seeing the echoes of Cyrus and Darius. From the postal service to our deepest philosophical concepts, how many ancient Persian ideas are still quietly shaping your world today? Think about that, and